Everybody, Steven here. Today I'm going to talk to you about some very old Hulk action figures. These four that you see before you are the Hulk figures that came from around mid 90s period. At that time there was a short-lived Incredible Hulk cartoon series, and some of these characters that you see before you, some of these variations of Hulk did show up in that series. So subsequently there was the line introduced along with the cartoon, and these four variations of Hulk come from a line called Hulk Transformations. They're predominantly based on the comics of Incredible Hulk, but one of them did show up in particular in that cartoon series. And there was an additional line, aside from this one, that showed some of the actual characters from the Hulk that showed up in the cartoon series. Those other ones, I don't have any samples of them, but they were more sort of an animated in appearance, to give it an impression that they're not really from the comics. And the thing is, both lines had some interesting offerings. They were practically released side by side. But anyway, let's start with the fellow right here. This is Maestro. Now you're probably wondering, okay, his name is Maestro, what does he got to do with Hulk? Well, this is actually Hulk, but from a distant future on Earth. When the Earth survived the nuclear war, the Hulk was caught in it, and he survived it, but he went insane from too much exposure to the nuclear weapons. He went fully insane, and his aggression went tenfold higher. And of course you can tell he's already older, because he has a white beard and mustache and practically no hair left other than on the sides. And he's still able to maintain his physique, so he's still extremely muscular when he transforms from Banner. And there was no more establishing any control over him, because in this time period he's completely out of control. He's attacking heroes and villains who survived the nuclear warfare, both left and right, and killing all of them. Not just defeating them, but actually killing them as well. And then after each fight he would keep a memento of that fight by stripping their enemies of something that was a trademark to them. So let's talk about the articulation first. So he does have articulation in the waistline. His arms can move all the way around 360 degrees, and there is a side articulation as well. The head can move slightly to the left and a little bit to the right. The legs can go forward about that much. They cannot move backwards. And when it comes to articulation, since most of the Marvel figures from that period were not very fully articulated, and when I say the time when he was released, I'm talking about the time way before Marvel Legends even existed. So at that time this was the best of the articulation they could get, very limited in many ways, so you could not really pose him in tons of different poses. They would be more static, but still looking good. And at least they got it right that for all these Hulks they would be bulky in appearance, not the way they're supposed to be. So one of the souvenirs, and he comes with many of the characters he defeated and killed. This skeleton that's in chrome and attached to his right wrist is actually Wolverine's skeleton, adamantium skeleton. He defeated Wolverine, ripped out his skeleton, and you can even see the claws are still there. So it's quite interesting how they came up with the idea of putting these little details. And the company that made these, of course, was Toybiz. Some of you are familiar with it because they also made the first Marvel Legends after this period has passed. And on the left wrist he has a broken Captain America's shield, and then a chain from the shield connecting Thor's hammer as well, so that obviously indicates he defeated them all and killed them all. This shield can be removed, but I just don't try to do so because I'm afraid of this green clip breaking on me, but the shield can be detached. And my theory, which I have no proof for, but it's just my guessing, that this chain is also not an ordinary chain, that this chain is actually the chain that belongs to the Ghost Rider, whom he must have probably defeated as well by then. So that would be the Maestro Hulk, or the futuristic Hulk, the most savage one among all the incarnations of Hulk. These figures were not the same height or size as the Marvel Legends. They were somewhat smaller than that, around 5.5 inches, thereabouts. And as you can tell, looking at them here, most of them are slightly crouched in the knees. So some are a little bit taller, like the version here on the left, and some are a little bit more shorter. But that's the way things were. You couldn't really get all the Hulks to be the same height or the same size. So the same goes for the Hulks at the back here. You see that the Grey Hulk on the left is quite a bit taller, and the one on the right is somewhat shorter and bent in the knees as well. And the other thing you could notice about their anatomy is the size of the heads is not always the same. They all come with big bodies and huge hands and so forth and so forth. But for example, the Hulk at the back here would come with a very tiny head for some reason, while the Grey Hulk on the left would come with a large head. Same goes for Maestro, who comes with a large head, and the Hulk next to him is sort of a neither too large nor too small, maybe just proportionate, I guess, to his size. But let's move on to the next incarnation of Hulk. This particular one is called the Hulk 2099, meaning that he's from a distant future in the year 2099. And this is, believe it or not the real Hulk, and it's not the Bruce Banner who transformed into this creature. It's a different character altogether, a civilian who is actually, I understand, a producer or a sort of an investigative reporter from that year. And while investigating a cult called the Knights of Banner, he was trying to find out what exactly were they doing and whom they were worshipping and what for. And in all that ensuing mayhem, because they discovered him and he also informed the police and so forth about the cult, he got caught in an accident that was very similar to Banner's, that actually permanently, to whatever extent, transformed him into this creature that resembles Hulk, but it's not the Hulk. The figure is very well done. He is more monstrous in appearance, and that's indicated first of all by his face and the long tongue, slithering tongue that comes out of his mouth, and also the fact that he doesn't have human hands. These are more like four-clawed fingers on a very overstretched palm, and when you look at his feet as well, they look more animal-like or a lizard-like. He also has a long, sort of a green fur going from top of his head all the way down to his waistline. So he has that furry appearance about him as well. And this is pretty much how he looked in the comics when he first was introduced. He comes with two weapons, although I'm not really sure why would he need any. He had pretty much the same kind of strength as the Hulk. And he comes with this futuristic looking, what it looks to me as a machine gun or a Gatling gun, a mini Gatling gun, although there would be no bullets in here on this particular accessory. It would be more like 4 orange rockets that you would just push in there and then he would fire them. And there would be, of course, a lot of bullets or grenades attached at the back on the belt. This weapon is removable because it's just adjusted by a clip, and another weapon that's also adjusted by a clip on his other wrist, and that would be this strange looking futuristic chainsaw. I don't really think, as I said, that he really needs any weapons, but if you really want to display him that way, that's fine. I guess that way he can sort of look more menacing. I'm not sure if in the comic book he had anything like this wielding in a battle. And when it comes to the articulation, He has articulation in the waistline, although in the case of mine it's sort of quite limited because it's quite an old toy altogether. So yes, there is an articulation in the waistline. He can put his legs this much forward, and unlike some of these other Hulk figures from the same line, he does have an articulation in his knees. None in the ankles, but at least that much. And he cannot put his legs backwards at all. His arms can go around 360 degrees. He can move the arms sideways, like so. No articulation in the wrists at all, and the head cannot be moved. Now you were probably wondering how did this character ended up in the end? Well, according to the comics, he met his demise by the end of his comics at the hands of a sort of a futuristic army that was comprised of a regular army and a advanced version of S.H.I.E.L.D. So they managed to destroy him and kill him in a big fight, and that's how the Hulk 2099 ceased to exist. He did seem to have appearances after his death as the years went by in some occasional comic books when somebody does time travel or go too far away into the future or so forth. So he would still every now and then show up there. But as the official story goes, he did die in a fight against the army. The next Hulk I'm going to talk about is this one right here with a very tiny head. And this would be Smart Hulk. This is actually Bruce Banner under there. And in this incarnation of the Hulk, Banner managed to establish a full control over the Hulk and make him smarter. Hence the fact that this Hulk is called a Smart Hulk or a Professor Hulk. He's very intelligent, just like Bruce Banner, and he's able to control his anger, and he's able to maintain his scientific mind even in this form. And he can talk like a scientist and interact with his allies far easier without getting enraged. He doesn't have any action features, so there is nothing at the back of him. He does have articulation, which is good, in the waistline. The legs can move only slightly forward, and that's only because the legs are molded in such a way that he's bent at the knees, and he's in a sort of a crouched position, which make him look shorter. His arms can go 360 degrees around. There is no side articulation, so he cannot move his arms sideways. However, he does have a wrist articulation, so the hands at the wrist can rotate all the way on both sides. And he did come with some kind of a rocket launcher, which I lost a long time ago, but I did preserve his other accessory, which I don't display him with because it doesn't look that good. Is this sort of like a like a battle armor of a sort, and it would be easily attached onto him just to slide it over his head. And his head, by the way, as I mentioned, is way too small for him, but he would have that armor for protection, although I guess he doesn't really need one, and that rocket launcher, which I don't have. What else can I say about him? Aside from the fact that the head is way too small for him, even though the facial features are pretty well done, there's not much else to say other than the fact that another proof that he's more smarter rather than savage looking in appearance is that his clothes are not torn up. His clothes look fine. He's wearing a shirt, a belt, and the pants without them being damaged or ripped in any way. So that would be as far as the Professor Hulk goes. He's a nice little figure. He's a nice bulky looking figure, and he's well represented in the toy form. Now the last one among the incarnations of Hulk I'm going to talk about it this time is, yes, you will say Grey Hulk. Yes, this is a Grey Hulk, except his name more specifically in this incarnation of his would be Joe Fixit. Joe Fixit is still Hulk, and of course is still Bruce Banner under it. except this version of Hulk decided to work as an enforcer in the city, in some clubs and such, so he would wear mostly like sort of a gangster suit to him. Of course you cannot see that suit because it's completely damaged during the battle, so it's all ripped and torn to shreds. But even though he can be angry and savage and still fight with his hands, he would also use weapons like machine guns and guns to fight the opponents. And he's able to communicate more properly, so he's not just grunting and saying a word or two, he can actually talk. As you can tell, what's represented in the pieces and bits of his suit here, that he's engaged in a battle, and he had a white shirt and a tie which was torn by bullet holes, and of course regular type of pants, and he even wears shoes and so forth, but since they all got damaged, then you can tell that they're falling apart and so forth. And you can also notice that he must have been wearing some decent clothes, because he's wearing white gloves, and he has bits of his shirt also here, and just tiny bits left of it, and you can see the cufflinks as well. And torn bits and pieces of the gloves all over the place. I have this version of Hulk from Marvel Legends that came about 8 or 9 years after this, when the Marvel Legends were already born and in full swing by toybiz. And that other version, which is also Joe Fixit but from Marvel Legends, came in a line called Incredible Hulk Classics, which were mainly focusing on different versions of Hulk and some of his enemies. So in this case he did come with 2 accessories. Unfortunately I don't have either of them anymore. He came with a sort of a gun or a rocket launcher of a sort that would be attached on his right hand here, and he also came with a hat. And as I said, unfortunately I don't have either of those anymore, but the figure is still here, and this is pretty much how he would look like. So this is Joe Fixit, also known as a Grey Hulk. So that would be it as far as this line goes. And just once more to say that the name of this toy line that came around 1996, around middle of 90s, is called the Hulk Transformations. It had several variations of Hulk and some of his enemies as well, and it also contained his cousin, the She-Hulk. So that would be the short history for you guys about these relatively old figures that came way before Marvel Legends even existed. Anyhow, thanks for watching, and next time I'll try and give you one more video on some of the remaining figures from this wave that I have, to just say a word or two about them. Thanks for watching. Bye.